Hello! Welcome to episode 3 of the You Could Be My Aramis podcast. I am your host, Mike Bankhead, bass player and songwriter from Dayton, Ohio. This week, we talked to a talented musician named Rich Reuter. Let's get into it. I should leave this in, nerding out on the really sensitive microphone.
Yeah, that's the thing about a condenser is you give it enough gain, and with it being phantom powered, it's more sensitive, and you get a stronger signal, but you get more noise, and that's where you get into signal versus having you want a low noise floor but high gain, so you can get as much signal as you can.
Half of those words I didn't understand what you meant. So that's a really good way to introduce Rich Reuter, who's very smart and knows things about sound. I kind of know what you do, but we're going to assume somebody else is listening to this.
Oh, sure.
So tell the somebody else who you are and what you do.
My name is Rich Reuter. I'm a guitar player local in the Dayton area. In addition, I've worn a lot of different hats as a singer-songwriter, bass player, and now I'm getting more into the production end of things, and have recently put on the engineer, producer hats when it comes to music. Those hats are apparently corduroy. They are. They are. It's more of a cap. It's a mastering cap.
So you say you're a guitar player, and I know you're not supposed to be like, I'm awesome, but I'm going to editorialize. Rich is awesome. And so as someone who doesn't play guitar, I'm going to tell you listeners what I observe when I see him play a show. He plays really complicated stuff without moving his hands very much, which means he's really technically skilled because he makes it look simpler than it really is. And I happen to find that really impressive. Also, among musicians in our community, there's not too many of them I can have a nerdy theory conversation with.
Yeah.
And you are that guy. You're somewhat well versed in how it all works together.
Yeah. I guess rock music, it isn't known for the theory aspect necessarily. Until you get into the more complicated stuff, you can deliver some great rock and roll without necessarily knowing how the sausage is made. But I've always had a pretty well-rounded musical education, and I had a teacher early on when I was taking bass lessons, actually, which is sort of the first rock band instrument I got into, but was really heavily theory-based, which has served me well ever since then.
Can you still read sheet music?
No, I was never great at it. I mean, I did a little bit of piano when I was a kid, and bass a bit. When I played like in jazz band in high school and stuff, but it quickly faded. As I'm getting into piano and trying to reteach myself some things, I'm getting back into reading a little bit, but no, I definitely read at a first grade level musically.
All right, well, I read at a 3-year-old level musically, so
I still have to every now and be like, one, two,
yeah.
D flat, the D flat, yeah.
I'm at the point where I look at it and it doesn't look foreign anymore, but it takes me way too long to figure out what it says, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, because it's like reading, a foreign language. Something I know you're familiar with. It's you don't have that fluidity quite yet where you can automatically translate what's on the page into your brain into meaning, where you can sit there and go, okay, well, these two notes are involved, so it's a C chord, it's this position, but obviously the more you do it, there are people who are able to pick that stuff out instantaneously.
Yeah. This is a tease for a future episode, but there's going to be an episode of this, and the person I'm interviewing, when putting a song together, notates the entire thing.
Really? That's awesome.
Like for an 8-part, like for a choir or something.
Wow, yeah.
Because that's her background in music.
Right.
So even if it's not necessarily going to be sung, writes the whole thing out, and that ability just kind of blows me away.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and it's interesting too. It's like you have people who have those skills, but then you're, just drop them into a band and you ask them to improvise or come up with something off the top of their head. And sometimes people like that struggle, and you don't often I don't know. You don't always get a combination of the two, where if you can have someone who has those abilities but also can just pull things out of the air as well, that's when you find the really impressive ones.
Yeah, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive, of course.
No.
But I guess if you spend a lot of time on the academic side, and if you're in classical and orchestral, where it's very much play what's on the page, play with intensity and some some passion. But at the end of the day, you got to play what's on the page.
Right.
I could see never having had to develop the skill where someone tells you it's in C, go.
Right, exactly. They're two different mindsets, and it's again, like as you said, they're not mutually exclusive, and they're very beneficial when you can do both of them to some degree. But yeah, they don't always exist in the same person.
So you said that you've done a lot of bands. How I met you is you were in the process of making your first record, and I was in the process of making my first record, and we were using the same engineer.
Yeah.
And we crossed paths in the studio.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Who's that tall guy?" And Patrick says, "That's Rich." So talk about that record that you made.
So that record was called The Captain. I put it out in 2016, in February. And it was just something I had been playing in some original projects. I kind of, if we back up a little bit, like I played in rock bands in high school, kind of more of the hard rock, almost pop rock genre. They're really, really diverse projects, but they're still kind of rooted in hard rock.
When you say hard rock in high school, that's early 90s, right? So you're talking Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins, or are you talking Van Halen, AC/DC?
More of that ilk. I kind of, I picked up the instrument, sort of late 80s, like right at the tail end of the hair metal stuff. So I was picking up guitar magazines with that kind of music and learning, those kind of songs, which I think ultimately has kind of served me well because those were a little more technically advanced than the next wave of rock that followed after it. So I was already kind of tuning my ear and learning how to play some more complicated stuff than, Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is great, but is also a very, easy song to play on guitar. Yeah. So it's not rocket science, but it doesn't mean it's not great. So the band I was in was kind of a bit rooted in that, but also, so we always kind of said, played everything from John Denver to Kiss, and it was mostly original stuff. So that was the other thing is, I was playing like 3-hour sets of original music that a friend of mine primarily was writing, and I had a few in there. So I was already learning how to sort of craft additional parts and ideas for someone else's material. And, I think that's always been kind of a strength of mine, is to be a good right-hand man for people in bands to help shape material and come up with secondary guitar parts and stuff like that. So I definitely developed a lot of that there. And then kind of, life came up and I kind of not stopped playing, but slowed way down for a few years. And then, maybe 2009 or so, got back into playing in local bands and got into sort of the jam scene. Headed a band called Nine False Sons for a few years, and then into another band called Lost on Innings, which is sort of this conglomeration of a bunch of musicians. And throughout those times, I wrote a number of original songs and had them all cataloged, but I never really got a chance to record them properly. So I decided I was just going to go ahead and put them down and just put out my own album, just because I wanted to capture these ideas. I got hooked up with Patrick Himes, who's done a lot of your stuff. And has become a good friend to us over the years, and it was actually one of his first projects coming back from Nashville. So we worked together for a couple months and knocked these songs out. I had a lot of friends in the area that I played with over the years come through and play on the album. Kind of tried to do different, sort of representative of different groups of people that I played with, and turned out reasonably well. It's an 8-song album. It's still out there and available for those of you at stream and all that. And then I kind of haven't really been able to revisit my own stuff a whole lot lately. After that, just because I kept busy with a number of different projects and was lucky enough to play in a lot of great things, but that certainly came at the cost of my own ideas and putting energy towards my own music. So certainly as the pandemic hit and things slowed down, I kind of got a chance to produce an album for a friend of mine, which really helped me sharpen up my skills as a producer and engineer, and in terms of mixing, mastering, and capturing things. So
you should plug that right now.
Sure, yeah.
You can't mention it and not say who it is.
So that album is called Backup State by a guy named Nicholas Johnson. Nick's a local guy who, Cincy Dayton guy who spent some time over in Italy But this was a redo of a previous album that he recorded 10 years ago. He and the producer were really green. He was never really happy with the results. So he ended up playing these songs live, but always had the idea that he would come back to them. He was currently in the process of cutting a follow-up to his Shady Pines Volume 1 album, Shady Pines Volume 2, with Patrick. And he's like, man, I want to do these other songs, but studio time with a professional isn't free. So I just kind of, having played with him a bit and been familiar with his songs, I kind of volunteered just because I had done some home recording and been getting more and more into it. So I took that opportunity to, give it a real shot.
Studio time with an amateur, a lot cheaper.
Yeah, much so. So, it was slow going at first, but but at the same time, I think it turned out well just because it's a culmination of, a lifetime of skills learned in terms of arranging and being in bands and understanding how songs are put together and stuff like that. So it came out really well, I think, all things considered, and certainly motivated me and, empowered me to do some more stuff. So I've been, currently I'm tracking what's now going to be a 4-song EP that I'm looking to have out in probably very early 2022. And then I'll start in February tracking The Captain 2 with Patrick.
The Captain 2.
Yes. I don't know. I don't have a subtitle yet, but
what are classic movie subtitles on second movie? The Captain Strikes Back?
It could be. Captain 2 Electric Boogaloo has been floated.
Yeah. Revenge of the Captain?
Nautical puns have been Man Overboard, Abandoned Ship.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. Abandoned Ship actually is sort of my current favorite, but no, the Captain moniker was a former bandmate and both my ex-wife referred to me as the captain of the ship of no fun.
Oh,
which is not entirely inaccurate.
I don't find you to be no fun necessarily. You're very serious.
That's because the people perhaps who called me that wanted to have more fun than perhaps it should be had. Some people don't like to be reined in, but it was an affection, I think, and so that's why I used it. And in fact, the opening track El Capitan is exactly about that. So yeah, that's where that name jokingly comes from. But
see, now the next time I listen to that, it's nice to have that story. I'll listen to it a different way.
Yeah,
the songs in that are, first of all, really good, and it's pretty cool that. Well, first of all, it's pretty cool that we have radio stations in an area that support local artists at all.
Yeah.
But if you listen to WUDR, the University of Dayton's radio station, or WYSO, our local NPR station, you're very likely to hear some songs from The Captain on both of those stations.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback, I guess, from it, and they've endured. I feel like I didn't, because I didn't have an original project going, and because I don't know, it just never really got kind of traction in terms of moving a lot of units or being able to sort of reach outside the Miami Valley with it. But
which is a shame because it's really good. But that's the challenge that all of us face when we make music, right? Like how do you get ears on it when people don't know who you are?
Right. And there's only so many hours in the day. So like I said, it's a trade-off. Do you be like me for a few years and take every guitar gig that you can find, or do you stop and try and push, your record, so.
Well, the nice thing is if someone hasn't heard it, it's new to them, even though it came out in 2016.
That's true.
The sad thing about the way the music industry works is, at least the media part of it, they don't want to hear anything if it's not like coming out now or next week.
Right.
Like, they want the next thing. But if someone hasn't heard your album, then to them, it's new. And I don't think it sounds dated from a songwriting or sonic perspective. In fact, this is a good segue. This is the part where I'm going to drop in my favorite song from the album. It's called Pale Light of the Moon.
dance into those blues. She's as sweet as a summer's day. You can see it when she moves. Doesn't give an answer, but she always leaves a clue. And all my thoughts go swirling round in the pale light of the moon. Smolders like a dying fire in the warm September night, when the wind sweeps through the grass and the fallen leaves take flight. When she goes away from me, it can never be too soon, until I find her standing there in the pale light of the moon. And I get lost and turn around. She pulls me in and calms me down. No matter how the years may go, there will always be a part of her that I will never know. Everything is silent but the drumming of the rain. Something so familiar, but it never feels the same. Nothing left to hide from her, nothing left to prove. I don't need to speak a word in the pale light of the moon. And I get lost and turned around. She pulls me in and calms me down. No matter how the years may go, there will always be a part of her that I will never know. Maggie's on that windowsill, still dancing to those blues. She's as sweet as a summer's day. You can see it when she moves, but the air around her changes when she steps into my room, and the dress falls from her shoulders in the pale light of the moon.
talk about Pale Light of the Moon, which again is my favorite song on The Captain.
The lyrics, I think, just started with the first line, Maggie's on the windowsill dancing to those blues. And I think it was originally going to be a blues song or something different. And then it just kind of turned into sort of a Spanish influence, melodic minor based song. And then at the very end, it goes into more, kind of I don't know, the exact rhythm escapes me, kind of more like a samba-ish sort of feel, like a more up-tempo Latin rhythm. And that all comes from a lot of it playing with my friends Chris Blank and Eric Reith, who are both great percussionists, and playing with Eric especially, which I've done for over a decade, introduced me to a lot of rhythms outside of standard rock rhythms and standard Western rhythms, and so I definitely kind of got some influences there. The other thing about the track is that it's got a really amazing string arrangement on it. My friend John Lardnois, kind of to call back to our earlier part of the conversation about people who can improvise and read.
Yeah, he's that guy.
He's that guy where he's just, off the charts at both. I had approached him about doing something on the song, and he's like, yeah, I think I've got some ideas and blah, blah, blah. And then he sends back this, 10 tracks worth of a string arrangement that's just incredible. And he sent it to me, and we dropped it in the session. And when I got it, I just drove around the block again and again, listening to it for 10 times in a row. Just I couldn't believe how good it sounded.
It's pretty.
Yeah, it's just so good. And so that really makes it. And it's I think the different feels that are in the song, in the production that Patrick put together, it turned out really well, and it's definitely the one that goes on the resume.
Yeah. So the reason I had you here, and it's not like you wouldn't have been around here anyway, is that you helped me out with the project that I have going on. You did a remix on "Hold the Wick," my upcoming single, which, folks, is not out yet, but I'm going to play for you Rich's remix right now. And if you are familiar with my music, you will recognize that this sounds nothing like me. So let's listen to it.
Light it up with me. Touch the surfaces you doused with gasoline. Pull the wick, brandish it by day. Grip it tighter when the wax is dripped away. Capillary action pulls you higher. So hold the wick. Stare into the flame. Steel yourself for what it takes to play the game. Hold the wick. Wave it all around. Gloating over the lives you burn to the ground. Capillary action pulls you higher. The wick.
All right, that was the smooth jazz version of Hold the Wick. So
I like to think of it more as like a weird fusion mix. I don't know.
how did you come up with that? What was your approach? Like, talk us through it.
I think when you sent over the tracks, and I kind of just was whittling away the elements, just sort of taking things away to see what I wanted to start with, and I just ended up with basically your voice, Patrick's voice on the background vocals, and then your bass part. And the bass part, I think, walked around enough that I think it suggested that it could be kind of jazzy. So I started, experimenting with some of the major seventh voicings, and then used a program to lay down some beats that are some swing beats and stuff like that, and then just kind of built it from there. And it's, I think, has become sort of typical of how I operate in the studio, is that I'll just get the basics down in terms of rhythms, some basic guitar parts, and then I'll just start embellishing. So I'll just grab whatever I feel like suits the song, try to dial in some sounds, and just play around with it, honestly. And both in terms of the part that gets played and then also the effects. As soon as you kind of start getting an idea of a shape of the song in terms of the direction sonically, then you can start pulling in elements that make sense for that. So when I kind of heard the jazz stuff, and then I was like, I kind of make it a little bit weird and atmospheric. So like I put in that solo stuff at the beginning with a lot of delay and repeats, and then it kind of collapses into something a little more straightforward to begin with. And then I kind of brought in some, maybe like it's almost got some kind of 90s feel with some of the guitar sounds in the verse and the solo and stuff, being a little bit more angular. But it was, honestly, just kind of playing around until I got to something I thought sounded good and was interesting. It wasn't, I think some things you have a vision for completely going in, or fairly completely, and other things just kind of, you get to make them up as you go along. And that's what I've found that I really like about working in the studio on my own, is just I have the freedom to do those kind of experiments. And if you're digital in the box, there's no real cost but your time. You don't have to worry about tape or whose clock that you're on. You can just kind of try stuff out. And
Patrick, cover your ears.
Well, and
our loving friend who, and I agree with his philosophy of do as much real stuff as you can.
Yeah.
To the extent possible. Mm-hmm. But you're right. The real stuff costs time, more money, and not all of us have a tape machine laying around,
No, but on the flip side is you have to be willing to lose the time it takes to find what you're looking to do, or to learn how to do it. For all that knowledge that I've gathered, then Patrick will put something out new and I'll be like, yeah, there it is. Like that's
a reason he's a professional.
That's what years of experience and better gear and a better space give you, is that you're able to produce things that are at a higher level. And I think as great as it is to be able to work out ideas in a home space, to actually produce something that's listenable is a whole different thing as well. So, there's certainly wisdom to kind of figuring your stuff out before you get into the studio, but unless you're really willing to invest the time and money, because it does take a certain amount of money to get a nicer mic, to get maybe some nicer plugins,
to treat the space you're in.
Thinking
about like this room, I know Den wasn't here, but look at the walls. Like you wouldn't want to track guitar or anything using the room sound in here,
right? So, and that's why I track almost every guitar and bass sound direct, except for acoustics, of course. But I had to invest in capabilities to run direct, so I could get big, giant guitar sounds without playing big, giant guitar sounds in my house. And even that, there's a trade-off versus having the real thing. There's nothing like being in the room with your amp as well. So it's it is a trade-off, and I like like with this EP coming up, I track the drums at Real Love, just because I can't track drums at home, so nor can I play them. Everything gets so heavily treated in the recording process.
This is also true.
I think that's another absolutely valuable part of getting into recording, is you sort of learn how sounds get made. And as great as a guitar can sound in the room, is like if you don't put the mic in the right spot and adjust the right EQ curves, it's not going to translate. And does also kind of contextualizing sounds. So a guitar or bass sound, if you got this huge bass sound, it may be great. Drop it into a track and it's trampling over everything. So you got to sort of carve out frequencies to make room for other things. And So it's a different mindset, and it's certainly made me a better guitar player and musician in general to think more like a producer and try to shape my sounds more like a producer.
So I mean, live, you're thinking about where you fit with the rest of your bandmates so that you don't muddy something up. Is that kind of like the
more so, yeah, than I have? Yeah. I mean, I've always tried to play nice, but I think the more time you spend with stuff like that, the more you just kind of train your ears. And same thing for playing in a live band if you're listening too.
That's totally a skill set, though, is finding the space in a mix for certain frequencies and making sure. I mean, this is not a skill set that I have. And when I hear engineers or you talk about it, it's like, yeah, that's why I pay people to make my records, because I'm
right. And that's a valid choice, because do you spend that time writing songs, or do you spend that time learning what 800K sounds like?
I'd rather write the songs, to be honest.
Right. I like to do both.
So you mentioned it already. We're going to mention it again. You have an EP coming out. Mm-hmm. You have more than one thing coming out next year. An EP that's 3 songs possibly out January, February, right?
Yeah, I think it's up to 4, actually.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So we're recording this, full disclosure, we're recording this in the beginning of December. This is going to be released in January. So you're listening to this in January. So by the time this gets out, we might be pretty close to your EP being ready.
I think so. It's 90... all the instruments are basically tracked except maybe 1 or 2 things, and then I got to do vocals. But it's very close.
And then after that, the Captain 2, do we know how long that's going to be? Have you already selected your songs for that, is the question.
I have not. No, I have no idea. I've just booked some dates and secured a drummer, and that's about it. So that's kind of that's my January's pre-production. Some of these songs have already been demoed in other areas or other ways, and so I'll have those done, and then I've got a few newer ones that I'm going to reshape and get ready. So I've got some good ideas, but I do need to do some pre-production in January to get ready for that kind of thrill of either when you nail a part or come up with the right thing, and for that first time you get to hear the way things fit together, and yeah, it's really satisfying. And I find that too with mixing. It's like where you're kind of playing around with stuff, and then you throw a switch and everything's sort of lined up the way you think it should be, and it's really gratifying.
Where can the people find you online so that they can spend money on a digital download of the Captain? So
it's if you look for Rich Reuter, REUTER, .bandcamp.com or richreuter.com, that'll take you there.
Outstanding.
I've got a few additional. I think I've got a couple singles up there, and then I've got a sort of side thing called Strange Passenger that I've put some instrumental stuff that I've done up there.
All right. Well, when the Captain 2 is ready and you're doing your media tour for that, I'd like you to come back and we'll talk about that.
For sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you again to Rich Reuter for being on the You Could Be My Aramis podcast. A treat for you on the outro music. Rich played guitar on a single that I released in spring of 2021. If you listen carefully to the other songs in this episode, I think you'll recognize his tasteful guitar stylings in this song. And before I drop the song in, I would like to thank you again for listening. If you like what you've heard, why not subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice? Why not leave a review? Those would be things that would help me out a lot in my newfound podcast journey. Again, thanks for listening, and I present to you Baile Conmigo with Rich Reuter on guitar.
Baile conmigo, baile conmigo.